Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a 100-point test tomorrow. It's going to be technically 25 points, right? 25 questions, but not really 25 questions. 20 points of the 25 are going to come from graphing parabolas and stating information about parabolas. Like, for example, I might give you a quadratic equation, and I'll tell you, find the vertex. That's one right there. Find the axis of symmetry. Oh, that's x equals the x value of the vertex. That's another one right there, right? So you're going to have 20 questions, 20 points of the 25 that come from graphing parabolas or stating information about parabolas. The other 5 questions come from the worksheet that we just did, which is solving equations, solving quadratic equations by factoring, right? Where you factor, split, and solve. Anyway, let's go and be more specific. What are you going to see on the test? The first 11 questions are going to come from, remember that little slip of paper I gave you guys that had four quadratic equations? We did this on Friday. I gave you a little tiny piece of paper. Actually, let me show you what I'm talking about. I gave you this little tiny piece of paper, and in the back of the class, I had this posted, the vertex. Originally, it said practice finding the vertex, but when I actually made the video with you guys, we decided to go through and state everything that we could about each of these quadratics, right? Now, what do I mean by that? We went through and stated the vertex. We stated the axis of symmetry. We stated the max or min value, and then we said what that max or min value was. We stated the Y-intercept by setting x equal to 0. We stated the domain and the range. We stated everything to know about a parabola just by looking at the parabola and calculating the vertex. So this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. The first 11 questions of the test, I'm going to pick 3 of these 4. All right, I'm going to pick 3 of these 4, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to rewrite that y. I'm going to change that to f of x. Then I'm going to go to the next one. Instead of y, I'm going to change that to g of x. Instead of, where are we at, 3, I'm going to change that to, oh wait, not 3. I'm going to change that to h of x. So anyways, I want to give them separate names. That way I could ask you individual questions, all right? So instead of saying, oh, tell me everything about f of x, I might just say, find the vertex of g of x, right? So one question might be, just find the vertex of g of x, right? So then you'd have to actually go through to g of x and find the vertex. Would anybody like to see me find the vertex on g of x? Sure? Okay, why not? So I hope you remember to find the vertex, you're going to use the formula x equals negative b over 2 times a. And when we use that formula, use parentheses instead of the b and the a. Identify your b, identify your a, and plug them in. 16, 2. We end up with negative 16 over positive 4, which means that our vertex x value is negative 4. Now, if you want the y value, what do? Plug it in. So we really have this exact quadratic trinomial rewritten, but with parentheses instead of the x's. So 2x squared plus 16x plus 1. And we put parentheses in place of the x's because we already know what x is. X is negative 4. So we're going to put that negative 4 right inside those parentheses. So negative 4 right there and negative 4 right there. You could calculate this whole answer using your calculator if you type it in correctly and carefully. I like to actually work through it. Negative 4 squared, that's positive 16. I have 2 times positive 16. That answer is 32. And then I move on to 16 times negative 4. That's actually negative 64. You could do that on a calculator and bring down that 1, so plus 1 at the very end. So when you go 32 take away 64, that's negative 32. And negative 32 plus 1, that gives you the y value of negative 31. So your vertex for number 2, or for g of x, is negative 4 comma negative 31. So instead of me telling you, like, answer everything you can about g of x, maybe just on g of x, I ask you to find the vertex, and that answer would be that the vertex is negative 4 comma negative 31. Now, if I ask you anything else about g of x, the vertex comes in handy. For example, if I say, what's the axis of symmetry of g of x? What's the axis of symmetry of g of x if you already know the vertex? It's x equals negative 4, the x value of your vertex. Or if I would say, does g of x have a max or min value, and what is that max or min value? What would you say? Does g of x have a max or min value? It's opening up, which means that it has a minimum value. And what would that minimum value be? If you already know your vertex, the y would be negative 31. So you would say the minimum value is negative 31. Y equals negative 31, right? So the vertex is the most important thing. If you know your vertex, you're able to state pretty much everything based off of that vertex. But what I'm saying is, I'm not going to ask you to state everything about f of x, everything about g of x. I want to jump around. I'll be like, find the y-intercept of h of x. Okay, so let's go to the h of x. Where is that? It's right here. And what would the y-intercept be? Yeah. How do you find the y-intercept? You set x equal to 0 and solve, right? So if you give it to me in the form of a coordinate, if you set x equal to 0, you're going to have 0 for x. And when you do plug in a 0 for x and a 0 for x, your c value will always be your resulting answer. So 0, negative 4 is the y-intercept. So we're going to be jumping around. What's the domain of f of x? What's the range of g of x? What's the vertex of h of x, right? So it all depends. I'm going to give you 3 functions, 3 of the 4. I'm going to select 3 of these 4. I'm telling you exactly what it's going to be. I'm picking 3 of the 4. I'm going to name them f of x, g of x, and h of x. And then I'll ask you specific questions regarding to either f of x, g of x, or h of x. Sound good? That's 11 points. That's 11 questions right there. That's pretty much the whole front side of the test. Okay, so questions 12, 13, 14 is graphing a parabola from this worksheet. And then questions 15, 16, 17 is graphing another one from this worksheet. So I'm actually picking 2 of them, all right? There's originally 8. I'm picking 2 of the 8. So I would go back and study this worksheet. Obviously, if you need help on this, go back and watch the video. But I'm picking 2 of the 8. Does anybody need me to review any of these? Or do I trust that you guys go back and study this? You're good with this? Okay, so if you need help practicing this, go back and watch the video, or watch just study your worksheet, practice it. The next 3 questions, questions 18 through 20, again, 1 through 11 was just random questions like, what's the vertex of h of x? What's the max value of g of x? Questions 12 through 17 are 2 graphing questions that are worth 3 points each. And that takes you all the way to 17. And then questions 18, 19, and 20 are this easy. These did not come out in your homework, but we've definitely talked about them. The instructions are going to read, use the related graph of each quadratic equation to determine its solutions. So here's your equation, and I want you to give me the answers based on this graph that represents this quadratic equation. So what are the answers to the number 4? 1 and 5. That's it. X equals 1 and 5. That's it. 1 and 5. Those are the answers. It's ridiculously easy, right? What's the answer to number 5? No solution, right? So sometimes you will have 2 answers if it crosses twice. Sometimes you have no answers if it doesn't cross. Or you might have this situation. Let's pretend that we had a parabola that just touches it. So what would be the answer to this blue parabola? X equals 5. So there's going to be 3 of those, specifically questions 18 through 20. 18, 19, and 20 is going to be 3 of these. And there's 3 types, one with 2 answers, one with 1 answer, one with no answers, probably one of each. Those are ridiculously easy. And finally, questions 21 through 25. It's just that worksheet that we just finished right now. So there's your entire test, question for question, right? All you guys got to do is study, okay? And again, from this worksheet, we only did the solving portion right here, this guy, where you factor, you split it using zero product property and solve it. So only 5 of these will be selected for questions 20 through 25. So please study. Make sure you review your homework. Make sure everything's complete. Test tomorrow, 100 points.